Welcome to the Data Centered Leadership Podcast. Today we have a really exciting guest. His name is Ben Taylor. He's the Chief AI Officer and co-founder of Zeff.ai, a company that accelerates AI value delivery around unstructured data for enterprises. He is a major AI influencer with a huge following, and Ben's background is really exciting because he started as a chemical engineer and he's developed himself to become this amazing AI influencer. So welcome, Ben, and look forward to discussing with you today.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. Thanks for having me.
So Ben, could you please tell us how you went from your chemical engineering background to becoming a leading data scientist and influencer? And do you have any suggestions for people who are just getting started for how they could try to follow a similar path into becoming data science experts?
Yeah, happy to share. So I studied chemical engineering, and I will forever be grateful to this numerical methods teacher. This is back in 2003, where he taught numerical methods, and this is for sophomores. And chemical engineers aren't known for programming, and so it's pretty light. I think it's like golden search method and some gradient, like very basic gradient search stuff, or solving a matrix, like a system of equations with matrix math. But he had us do genetic algorithms, simulated annealing, and some of the more aggressive things that maybe wouldn't be taught in that class. And I fell in love with it. I thought it was so interesting that the computer could solve these really large problems. And I started playing with computer vision. So I think that's when I kind of broke away from chemical engineering. So I stayed in chemical engineering. Actually, I was the department president. So it was funny because I actually hated chemical engineering. So I think when I was over in Reno as a sophomore or even as a junior, I hated chemical engineering. I felt like I maybe made a mistake. I wasn't happy there. And then once I became the president, when I had to convince other people to stay in the department, then I kind of fell in love with it. Because that was my job as president. Like, this is why we're chemical engineers. This is why you have to stay in the department. But I started programming. I actually had a rock climbing store, so an e-commerce rock climbing store where I had to do all the programming. So this is PHP, MySQL, LAMP stack, like back in 2003 when that used to be cool. I guess it's not cool anymore. But I just kind of went through it, and I was not a very good programmer. And I remember paying college kids from the CS department to fix bugs in my code, like literally handing them $50 to like troubleshoot a bug for my rock climbing store. And then ever since then, I just did programming projects related to chemical engineering. And I got into some high performance computing stuff with satellite image processing that I really liked. And then I went over to Intel and Micron, which is getting a job at Intel and Micron after grad school is what you'd expect a chemical engineer to do, go into petroleum or semiconductor. That would be a very normal thing. And so I think the switch over to data science was kind of slow, where I was always programming. I really liked doing very crunchy things that required high performance computing. I love the idea of my computer running all week to do something. And I think the big breakthrough for me came when I joined a hedge fund. So I joined a hedge fund as a quant. For people that don't know what a quant is, it's slang for a quantitative analyst. Are you familiar with a quant? Not everyone is. Have you heard this term before?
Yes, quantitative analysts, they look at the stock charts and they try to put like the history of the stock charts into different financial models and also machine learning models to try to predict the stock prices and make automated trades, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the fascinating thing with quants is everyone reacts to data science being a new thing, that we have people coming into the market that are really good at math and they're really good at programming, and what can they do with that? And there have been very successful quants in Wall Street for decades. So these are people, PhD in physics or math from Harvard, and they program better than most CS grads. And they're working for Wall Street, and they're making an insane amount of money. There are stories of quants making $400,000, $500,000, $700,000 a year even multi-million-dollar a year salary comp packages from Wall Street. And so even today, I look at these people as being data scientists. Maybe they weren't using deep learning, and maybe they weren't using, some ensemble method or something, but they were using matrix math that most data scientists don't understand today.
Wow.
Like they're very, very solid data scientists, but they're called quants. So I had an opportunity to do that. So I joined them as their GPU and AI expert because they had appetite to kind of move over into some of these new models. And the funny thing with that is that wasn't my previous job. I actually just did that for fun. And that's actually how I found out about the job. One of my coworkers at Intel and Micron came up to me and said, I just found a job opening with GPU computing and AI, and you do that for fun. So imagine if what you did for fun became your job. And so I got the job at the hedge fund, and I also want people to know that this is before deep learning even existed. Because a lot of people think that deep learning is kind of tied to GPU compute. So this is before deep learning. And so we were doing some very aggressive matrix math on GPUs years before deep learning hit the market. And not only were we doing that, we were doing it at scale. We had 600 GPUs in the office. So when it comes to high consequence models, big systems, big infrastructure, I was able to get all of that experience at the hedge fund. And so when people started asking for data science in the market, I was, essentially tooled up by then to offer that. And the hedge fund really helped a lot.
Wow. So when you were in Micron and Intel, you were doing some computational work, but it was lighter. But in your personal time, you were doing the really heavy stuff for fun.
Yeah, I was doing that during my personal time. But when I worked for Intel and Micron, I was always hunting for those programming projects. And there were a lot of them there because the other engineers didn't program. Like most of them didn't program. So, if you could get database credentials to some of these production systems, and I did some of that. Like I would do some automated excursion analysis. So in semiconductor, you have wafers that move through the semiconductor plant. So the chips in your phone, if you broke open your phone, which maybe some people have, and that's really sad, you may actually see something that looks like a semiconductor chip, like NAND flash in your phone. And those are made on huge wafers that are 12 inches across. They're circular, and they'll go through a manufacturing process that can take anywhere from 30 to 60 days. And there's hundreds of these chips on one wafer, and they produce tens of thousands of these every week. It's a huge operation. There's billions of dollars invested into this process, and not every once in a while, all the time, wafers are misprocessed. So think of a wafer that has a unique journey through a fab. Every wafer goes through the fab differently. There's no wafers that go through the fab the same way, and some of them have yield fallout, and that yield fallout can be very expensive. It can be worth millions of dollars. And so anything you can do to detect root cause and catch things early. So there's huge opportunity for some very crunchy analysis. And so I spent my time in, these words won't make sense to people that aren't familiar, but I worked in a department called photolithography. I worked in metrology. I worked in process control, and I worked in yield analysis and excursion prediction while I was there. So I worked there for 5 years, and it also gets back to job. What makes a job a good job? Because I wasn't very stressed working at Ion Flash, but I also didn't make nearly as much as I made later as a data scientist. So, I was also much happier later when I joined HireVue after my time at the hedge fund.
So you felt like you got a fairly strong background in the semiconductor industry. A friend recommended you to do the quantitative analysis for stock market, and then you really started to become an expert in this high performance computing. Then you moved to a company called HireVue.
Yeah, so HireVue is a funny story because they were, so I don't really get too far into the details of this story because I actually worked 4 years at Ion Flash, the Intel Micron joint venture. I went to a hedge fund for a year, and then I quit the hedge fund and I went back to Ion Flash for 1 year, which the details of that are there's a lot of drama involved. They fired a key person at I Am Flash. I was kind of stressed to my limit. They invited me to come back. I came back, and then I quit a year later, and it was actually really bad. Like, people were so angry at me for quitting. And Micron has a policy. They will allow everyone to quit once because it's kind of like you've made a mistake.
Yes.
They won't allow you. So they actually won't allow me to go work there again because I've quit twice.
Wow.
But I'm actually on the naughty list, or the HR list. And so I've joked that maybe because of where I am now in my career, or the value that I could bring, maybe I could be the first person in history of the planet to quit Micron 3 times. But it's just funny. I worked there for a year. I wasn't happy. So the hedge fund, I made a lot of money. I wasn't making as much going back to I Am Flash. I was making more than I was making before, but I just really wasn't happy there. And then the data science market was blowing up, where I was literally getting job offers that were 50% higher than I was making currently. So 50 higher. And that was really upsetting for me because I felt like I just wasn't being valued. The market was valuing me higher. And so I went back into the job market, and I picked up a handful of offers. So I had 3 offers in hand, and one of those was HireVue. And I really wasn't interested in working for an HR company, but I found out they were getting around from Sequoia Capital. And Sequoia Capital is one of the most famous VC firms in the world. And evidence to that here in Utah, Qualtrics was one of their investments. They sold for $8 billion to SAP. Health Catalyst was one of their other investments, and they just IPO'd at a great evaluation. So Sequoia is really good at picking these billion-dollar successes. So with no interest in joining HR, I joined HireVue because I was excited about the opportunity there. So I had a great time there, worked there for 4 years. I built out their data science team, and more importantly, we delivered an AI product into the HireVue platform that would use video during the video interviewing process. It would use that to make predictions on how well candidates were doing on the interview. So should they be filtered up or down based on the way they were answering questions, and that was a lot of fun.
That's a really exciting and novel application of machine learning, and it sounds like it could be controversial to some people that this major part of their life of trying to get a new job would be evaluated by a artificial intelligence or some neural networks.
Yeah, and honestly, to be very open, for me, that was part of the appeal, that this is new uncharted territory, and maybe it is a little on the edge, but and actually the controversy is definitely there. I think there was some thread that blew up a couple days ago on Reddit or even Twitter calling out HireVue for some of these interview Black Mirror techniques. The thing that people don't know is the human process is plagued with bias. So you go show me a human process that's processing thousands of candidates, and I'll show you racism and sexism and age bias and all these things that are going on. So for any criticism that someone might give to an AI system, that criticism exists with the human alternative. But the thing that I was really proud of with our data science team is we were able to build out active adverse mitigation tactics. So you could actually give us a racist training set or a sexist training set, and we would ship a model into production that didn't transfer that bias. And we even presented our techniques 3 or 4 years ago to the EEOC in DC. So they're the equal opportunity folks that keep the system in check, and we had a lot of really good feedback. So I feel like today if you care about getting performers in the door and you care about protecting a company against bias, sexism, racism, age bias, whatever the bias is, HireVue, the technology that we built there is one of the best options out there. And you do hear bad press about Amazon's resume model, or Beauty.ai built a racist beauty model, and that stuff happens, but I feel like those groups are very naive and they're not thinking about it from the beginning.
That's an inspiring story, really, that you figured out a way to cancel out the the bias, because most of the time we see these articles about giant AI that find some discriminatory features and stick to that.
Yeah, and in AI, that's actually the default. So that's the guarantee. AI will magnify the biases or find them and transfer them straight across. And the interesting thing about careers is there are so many mistakes. Like, I don't care who you are, there are so many mistakes in a career. And the funny thing today is if I'm consulting or if I'm giving someone some advice, they might think that that advice is smart or it's creative or there's something special about it, but really it's the experience. So a lot of the good advice that I try to give, it's attached to significant mistakes that I've made through these different companies I've worked for. And one of the mistakes actually came when we were chasing active adverse mitigation. So which features do you remove to block racism? We had a whole team of PhD physicists on the data science team. And I don't have a PhD, by the way, but we have really smart people working on this problem. And for 2 weeks, we tried something that was very complicated. It was some type of multi-threaded genetic algorithm approach to reward a custom objective function. And the results looked really, really good on the validation test, but they never followed through. Or they looked really, really good on training, but they just weren't generalizing like we hoped they were. And we spent 2 weeks on that. And then finally, we shifted to something that was very, very simple, like just kind of first principles, and that worked really well. And so one of the pitfalls that a lot of data scientists fall into is they try to do things that are too complicated and they delay shipping value, where one of the things I talk about is a Bayesian model in production this week is better than new tech that never gets shipped. So, or even new tech that comes later. Yeah, so HireVue, they've had active adverse mitigation for 4 years, and the rest of the industry is still talking about it. Like, still talking about how you would do it. And HireVue's had it in production for 4 years now.
Amazing. That's a really good example of how AI can improve the world. Yeah.
And I'll just interject one other thing here too. The part of me working in industry, I get sensitive to academic opinions, and so academics are incredibly useful because they can solve, well, like a lot of our big AI breakthroughs are attached to academics. They've come up with big breakthroughs in AI that are useful. But one of the things we notice with academics is they actually don't solve real world problems. They solve academic problems. So something like ImageNet or these different things they run into. And when HireVue was building out their technology, we would have academics tweeting at us, and they would tweet white papers to us. Like, they'd literally tweet white papers to us that our data science team should go read. And of course, we'd look at those white papers, and we were looking at technology that was incredibly inferior. It was 5 years too old. But the thing that was more upsetting is these white papers were trained on 100 video interviews of college kids pretending to get a job. and HireVue has 10 million interviews of real people getting jobs in the, like, where the consequences are real. This interview better go well if you want the job. And so a lot of these academic insights are, they're kind of empty, and there's not a lot of value there. Where, anyway, I don't want to get off on this academic tangent, but we see that all the time, that you have data scientists that can be very academic, where we see that as kind of navel gazing. They're not exposed to the real world, but then you get in the real world and problems are nasty. Like, you have issues with data quality, you have issues with skew, where you're chasing a target on a classifier that's 1,000 to 1 or some ridiculous number, or even ridiculous skew on a regressor that causes all sorts of issues that a lot of academics don't address.
So you're in industry, that's a compelling argument for trying to get into industry faster as a aspiring career data scientist, because you have to use realistic data sets to solve the problem, whereas in academia, people can just get so wrapped up in looking at irrelevant data sets and not really doing as much for the world. Yeah, and it's also not really fair, because in industry we have a lot more capital to play with. So we have bigger teams, we have bigger hardware, we just have bigger problems with money behind it. So
like there's no academic institution in the world that can afford to get their hands on 10 million job interviews. Like they just can't, or like, or yeah, so that's a big benefit, or it can be. And we get a lot of value solving problems for the enterprise because we learn every time you successfully complete a project or a problem, you learn something along the way, and those can be built into the product, into the feature set.
So getting back to the first major question and about your progression in your career and kind of what somebody new to the field can do. It sounds like you've taken many more risks than the typical new person who goes through college and tries to get a good job. You said you, in the chemical department, even though you're more interested in computer science, you still went for a leadership role, a president role of the chemical engineering department, and then you also switched jobs multiple times and did significant extra work outside of your job to try to start a company and to learn the latest technology. So, but the technology has changed fairly significantly from the time you started to now. So so with all that you've learned taking those risks, do you have any suggestions for what a new aspiring person, anything specific about what they could try to do to move faster and be successful in this field?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of value in networking. So going to meetups, rubbing shoulders with other people. A lot of the data leaders or the people that would potentially give you a job, they don't necessarily go to all of those meetups. So but some of them do. You can run into them there. I always recommend joining a startup over an established company if you have that option, because every time I've seen someone do it, they learn so much. So like me joining HireVue, it gives you an opportunity to grow. You can grow a department under you. You can, it's just it's a very fast-paced environment, and they're open to innovation. So the other thing too, I definitely had anxiety leaving IM Flash because I had worked there for 4 years and people didn't leave. People would stay there and retire there, and that was kind of the advice and the expectation. And I remember running into an engineer who was actually a neighbor of mine, and he admitted that he was on his 4th job after graduating as an engineer. And him saying that gave me a lot of anxiety.
Yes.
Because I just imagined, what would I do if I was laid off next week? What would I do? Like, I have no idea what I would do if I was laid off next week. And that was kind of me back then. But when I joined HireVue, the thing I got so excited about, and I have so much respect for Lauren, he's the CTO over at HireVue, and his engineering team is great. And looking around the room at the engineers and kind of what they worked on, I very early on, my first year in HireVue, I realized that if Lauren got up for an LT meeting and said, "Hey guys, I've got really bad news. There's only one more paycheck coming. You're all laid off, everyone." If you said that in a traditional company, that there'd be complete panic. That would be an unbelievable thing. But with the talent level that HireVue had, I felt like a lot of the engineers they'd be fine. And kind of their attitude would be, "Well, thanks for the raise, and I'll get a handful of job offers next week." Like
Wow.
Like honestly, that is always their alternative. So any of these bigger companies, or not these bigger companies, but these good startups, these solid startups, there's always a raise option available to them. But they choose to work with the team, they choose to grow it, and so having that level of confidence, I realized that that's where I wanted to be, and in getting there is very freeing because you can become much more selective on the job you want. Where talking to junior data scientists, I totally relate that it's very discouraging. I don't know what the ratio numbers, but if I had to guess, it's 100 to 1 or 1,000 to 1 of the people trying to break into those junior data science roles and actually land titled junior data science roles that will grow their career. It's a lot of people want to break in, but once you get in, we see the reverse. If you go up into the senior level, like one example is I had, just in my network, I had 10 job openings for senior data science positions. So 10 different openings. Each of those should be pulling in 100 to 1,000 applicants. And I could only get 2 resumes.
Wow.
But if you go on the junior side, it's overwhelming. But if you go on the senior side, everyone you want to hire for a senior data science position, they're already working at a wonderful job. And if they were on the market, most likely through their network, they would have placement options outside of a posting. And so everyone wants to hire a senior principal data scientist, but there aren't a lot of them looking. So that's the upside or the appeal for people that can make it through that initial barrier of demonstrating value as a junior data scientist.
And the two best ways you recommend are going to data science/AI meetups and joining a startup, just trying to network in general.
I think joining a startup, something I've said online that people don't, I say a lot of things online that people don't like. And one of the things I said online is I said, if you really want to get, if you really want to get a solid research position in data science, demonstrate that you can deliver world's first. So demonstrate today, or like next week. So I'm talking to you right now, and next week come in and demonstrate that you are doing something that no one else in the world has done, whether you've got an algorithm that is significantly more accurate, or on the high performance compute side, you've got something that's an order of magnitude faster than anything that's publicly available, or whatever it is. I don't care about just features and speeds, but you develop something in the next week that does not exist. And for a lot of junior talent, they haven't put in the time yet to kind of understand where that would happen or be useful, but I get really excited interacting with people where they can do that. And part of that just comes through experience, but it also comes through passion. If you're very passionate about a project, and that's a common thing that a lot of data science leaders bring up, is the number one reason you get hired is passion. So show me all your passion projects because I want to be excited to hire you. Another reason people get hired is you actually have something. You literally have something in your brain that I don't have. You're going to bring it to my team. You've got some experience, you've got some background, you're useful. And then the third thing is, do I like you? Like, do I want to hang out with you in the office? And do I imagine a scenario where that's true? And if you can check the box on all three, those people tend to get offers. But if you don't have passion, if you just want a salary, and the other point on passion, one of the things I talk about is the AI or the data science position I'm hiring you for today, no one is qualified to do it a year from now, meaning I need you to self-teach. So if deep learning version 5 comes out, or some brand new thing, which will happen in the next 6 months, I don't expect you, like, I don't need to tell you about it. I need you to just find out about it, tool up on it, discover if it's useful, and ship it. And those are the type of people we want to hire generally in the data science community. But there aren't a lot of people with passion where they hustle, they know a lot. Communication and business acumen also helps too, but it's not required.
That part you just mentioned about finding the latest thing and getting it ready to ship without even telling you about it, that sounds like something that's really unique to the startup arena. I mean, because I haven't really seen anything like that in my junior level experience. So that, would you say that you gained that mentality from doing startups, or were you able to do things like that in the larger corporations too?
I think the key thing here is getting to done. So a lot of people build models. They'll build an R script or they'll build a notebook. But actually taking something to done where there are other people that depend on it when you're sleeping, when you're away, and when you quit your job, that puts you into a rare class of data scientists. The vast majority of data scientists can't point to a model that they've shipped into production that has dependencies that have outlasted them or outlived them. They do a lot of what we call BI. So they do a lot of like business intelligence or analysis where they're looking for knowledge nuggets and they're demonstrating, discovery, but getting stuff into production, that's a really important milestone for everyone to cross if you want to kind of move up in the ranks. Because that's what these companies are looking for. So if a company's looking for their first data science hire, they expect you to have successfully shipped AI into production somewhere in the past. And if the answer is no, then that you become a liability. But they're looking for experience. That's what people pay for, experience. And experience is demonstrated with consumption and automation.
Nice. That's really interesting. Thanks for your insights. So, switching gears, how did you? So going from HireVue, you went to did you create your company shortly after that, Zeff.ai?
Yeah, so I worked for HireVue for 4 years, and I was really happy at HireVue. I loved my team. They're all handpicked. I was involved with hiring them. I love the problems we're working on. HireVue is they're allowing me to speak, so I'm traveling all over speaking. Got to speak in Sydney, speaking all over the U.S., and I'm just having a wonderful time. And I'm able to kind of build a reputation for myself in the HR analytics space. And I love my boss. I love the company. I ski. I ski whenever I feel like skiing. Like I can literally just Slack someone at work and say, hey, let's move the meeting tomorrow morning. It's powder day. I'm going to go skiing. Like I have that level of flexibility. And so, and my comp is great. I'm making great market comp. So like, you'd think with all of that, my wife is very happy, my family's happy. You'd think with all of that, you wouldn't leave. You just, keep growing that and, have a blast. But I had this startup itch, and I've always kind of had a project or startup itch. And so 4 years ago, that started growing, and I started to think a lot about autonomous machine learning, or AutoML. So there's a whole category of AutoML on how do you get rid of the data scientists, how do you enable engineers to be more productive than any data scientist has ever been, whether it's structured, unstructured data, model deployment. And so this was something we were definitely thinking through 4 years ago, and eventually got to the point where I decided to take the leap. And so, I walked away from my favorite job I've ever had, highest pay I've ever had, best ski flexibility I've ever had, and the perfect team. I just walked away, just took that risk without looking back to go try to make a startup work. And in doing a startup, you talk to other people that have done startups, and they talk about burning the ships and doing all these different things. But until you actually go and do it, you're clueless. You have no idea. You think you know. You're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed going out into the market to build an AI company, but until you do it, you are clueless, myself included. And so we did this, went full-time, it'll be 3 years ago in January, and started chasing the market. We bootstrapped the company, which is really aggressive. That means you literally pay for every mistake you make, like literally. So you make a mistake, that's a check you're not sending back to your family. And so it's been a wild ride. We've learned a lot, and it's, as far as tuition goes, like, because people think about next steps in your career. So like if you actually wrote someone's career out on a piece of paper, first get a junior data science position, then get promoted to a data science position, then switch companies and become a senior data scientist, then principal, and then become a director or chief data scientist, or go to a startup. And a startup is definitely, it definitely makes sense for another step in someone's career, because you learn so much more than you knew before. You really get a better sense for activity versus progress, shipping value, like the true cost of employees. Because I think before with HireVue, if like I loved my team, but let's say there was a bad week or a bad month. Like let's say I decide that you actually wasted time the last month. Like you're working on a project, maybe I had told you, like maybe we agreed together to work on this project, and I decide in the last month or two that you've wasted time. For a bigger company, it's really not a big deal. It's like a shoulder shrug, and that's just considered the cost of R&D. If it's a startup, and if it's a bootstrap startup, and if I'm paying you to do work, and if that work isn't making me money, there's a very different way that you're perceived as an employee. So and I don't want to make the analogy to the jungle, but there is like this very much eat or be eaten predator reality of a startup. But just because you have a raw pitch doesn't mean that you're going to be worth $1 billion. Like, and being worth $1 billion is very different than actually being worth $1 billion, because some VCs will evaluate you that high, but until you have a liquidation event into, you know, the public sector or through an acquisition, the evaluation is almost meaningless.
Wow. Yeah, it doesn't mean anything until you have the cash in hand, I guess.
Yeah, and we've had opportunities to have cash in hand. We've had a handful of acquisition offers. Some we've considered more than others, and you talk to any founder, there's always a huge hesitation for them to get bought before they feel like they've tested their idea. Because like when you start getting traction and you're growing, you really haven't tested your idea yet. It's not until you hit these bigger numbers and you grow it. And so for us early on with acquisitions, that's definitely been top of mind on, because the other problem with acquisition is you have to go back to getting a job. And, you know, if you had to go back to getting a job, that was always available, but what type of job do you want, kind of a thing.
So do you have any interesting projects you're working on that are not classified that you'd like to discuss?
Yeah, and I'm happy to be very open on, like, we have technical trade secrets that exist in our product tied to quality, accuracy, throughput, performance, time to value, stuff like that. But when it comes to our passion projects, I'm very open about what we're working on, what we have worked on. Some of the ones we've done in the past that have grown more traction than I thought they would. A lot of people are familiar with GANs. So these are these generative adversarial networks that you can make fake human faces, and they keep getting better. And we did a piece last summer, so a year ago now, where we used genetic algorithms to drive the latent space in a GAN to satisfy a basket of pre-trained models around race, gender, country of origin, beauty. We have all of these pre-trained models that we can satisfy. And at the time, the GANs that we were producing with that additional lift were some of the best that anyone had ever seen in the world. Wow. They could not believe how good they were, but more importantly, they were targeted. So the fact that this woman is an attractive black female, this age range, or this ancestry was intentional. She was engineered before she was produced to hit these goals, and sure enough, she is. And we can run it multiple times and produce multiple of these. And releasing that, we became #1 in the world for AI on Quora for 2 months. Just kind of dominated the leaderboard because people were really interested in that. And then the other thing we showed is you can actually have a creative director get in the middle of that, and they can have these individuals start to mate. So I can take, they will mate, and they'll produce offspring that appear, it's very intuitive. Like if these two women could mate together, or these two men, they actually produce offspring that are believable, where you would anticipate that type of behavior. So we showed that as well. And then we showed ABC's The Bachelor, Bachelorette prediction results. That got a big reaction, showing that we can actually predict the outcome of The Bachelor just by looking at a face before the show starts. We did that more for an ethics play because we were able to show that the model is racist and has a beauty bias and a genetic bias. It has all these things that people already knew. The project I'm the most excited about right now, we talked about this a little bit offline, is this is also one of our most ambitious projects. I have obsessed for years about using AI to play my Xbox. So this is just me, Ben Taylor, at my home eating popcorn, and I'm watching my Xbox dominate, just kill everyone in Call of Duty online. And I've obsessed about this for years, where I thought, man, how amazing would that be to have full auto kill? Because I know AI would be amazing, and I suck. I'm not very good, especially compared to these kids. But I always felt like, well, this is probably a $3 to $5 million price tag to even bridge this gap, because it's a non-trivial thing. There's USB drivers. The Xbox is not made to just pound it with an AI computer. It's not designed that way. And there's actually people will cheat with the Xbox, and they have things in place to try to prevent you from doing that. And so I decided, so this was just kind of a pipe dream. And I don't know how I stumbled across this, but for whatever reason, 9 months ago, I realized that I could cobble together a solution for less than $2,000 to just do it.
Less than 5 million to less than 2,000?
Well, so the 5 million is accounting for like USB network driver engineers, and then the AI talent. And so I don't want to belittle, so maybe the hardware costs were insignificant. It's more of a talent cost. Like, how am I going to get people that can figure out how to override the Xbox? Because I'm going to have to do some type of like network protocol analysis where you're doing a man-in-the-middle attack. So I was more concerned about the talent. Like, how much talent would it take to do this? But I for $2,000, I was able to kind of cobble the hardware elements together. One of the pieces actually had to come from France, which is hilarious because I never thought I would order anything from France. No knock on France, but when it comes to technology, that's not a place I'd normally go shopping for technology. So I ordered this little gimmicks adapter, which actually does a man-in-the-middle attack on the Xbox. It tricks the Xbox into thinking that, like, it kind of takes over for an Xbox controller and tricks it into making the Xbox think that you are that controller. And so what I've done is I have a GPU computer, and so now I can hook up any GPU computer I want to my Xbox. And this is a vanilla Xbox. It's not modified. I could go buy a new one tomorrow at Walmart and control it with this computer, which I've been very excited about. So you got the system working, and then this is something I'm going to be presenting at Data Science Go. So I'm very excited about my Data Science Go talk because it actually falls in line with what we're doing for the enterprise, because people don't realize the models shipped that are useful at the enterprise level are overwhelmingly complex compared to an academic or your traditional junior data scientist. A lot of data scientists think they can build an image classifier or they can build a regressor, and that is somehow useful. And the place we've gotten to is we have to build models that use multiple types of images. They use text, they use audio, they use video, they use structured data, and they bring it all together. And for this Xbox model, I don't have an exact count, but it looks like this thing will be built out of anywhere from 10 to maybe even up to 40 models that are all working together. So these systems are way more advanced, but they're really fun to build because you learn a lot building these.
Amazing. You learn and the computer learns too.
Yeah, you learn, the computer learns, and all along the way you realize how bad the humans are compared to this alternative. So a few examples that we've learned are latency. And maybe real quick, I'll explain the setup. So I have an Xbox, I have an AI computer, and I've got an HDMI capture card that is actually taking the HDMI stream coming off of the Xbox, and it's feeding it into my gaming machine. So I can get frames off the Xbox in my Linux laptop just like I normally would, but they're coming straight from the Xbox. I can feed them in at 60 frames per second at 1080p, 1920, full resolution. We notice our capture card's more stable if I feed them in at 30 frames per second. And so we're getting all the frames in memory in the Linux machine, and the lag is very, very small. It's maybe 20 milliseconds. And the human brain has a lag that's anywhere from 150 to 200 milliseconds on a visual reaction. And so already the computer has a huge advantage over you. It's seeing things faster than you are. Its ability to react to an inference is faster than you. The other thing we notice is humans are really bad at multitasking, and the computer sees everything. There's so much information in this 1080p feed that the computer is analyzing. There's so much information. One of the really fun things that we found was muzzle flashes. So if you shoot a gun, you pull the trigger, there could be anywhere from an indistinguishable lag to 0.25 seconds before the bullet leaves your gun. It depends on the position of your gun. So if your gun's down by your waist, it won't fire immediately, but if you have it up and ready, then it'll fire sooner. But the fascinating thing is we see muzzle blasts, and they're very, very fast. They only last for 1 or 2 frames. And the computer can catch muzzle blasts with perfect accuracy. It can catch hit indicators with perfect accuracy. It can look at the enemy muzzle blasts. And so you quickly come up with a laundry list of all of these things the computer knows in real time at 30 frames per second on full HD in real time with almost perfect accuracy. And all of that stuff gets pooled into the final decoder model that actually does the play.
So it's almost like you have 40, like you said, you have 40 models looking at 40 different aspects of the game.
We call these encoders. And
okay.
2 years ago, we were the first people talking about this or thinking about it. And we talked about this more internally. This is coming out more in the wild. I think Uber just released an open source project called Ludwig, where they call these things encoders and decoders, because that's how you build out these really sophisticated systems. You have encoders to encode everything that's not structured, and then you have a decoder that consumes all that information to make a final decision.
Wow. So if you have 40 encoders, it's almost like, I mean, one person could maybe distinguish 1 or 2 things, but they'd be about 5 to 10 times slower. So it's almost like you have 40 super fast people, 40 superhumans working in conjunction.
Yeah.
Already.
And this is, so you're already hitting on something which is a different topic, but this is really what I'm leading to. So the people I presented this at Amazon's Palo Alto AI headquarters, and I presented it, we presented initial work, some of the initial models that we're building out for this project. And playing full auto on the Xbox is really exciting because you can have a Twitch feed. Microsoft will be upset about it, but that's part of the fun of it. And you're just, you're essentially playing live online without anyone's permission with an AI system that can't be detected, and you are killing people without their permission. And I think that is really interesting for a few reasons. So I do like trolling Microsoft, but I also like, it also raises the ethics debate on when Google did Dota 2, StarCraft, and these different games, Go, no one was worried. No one was terrified. We're actually hoping that by showing this, it will kind of accelerate the discussion around autonomous warfare, because this computer is really good at killing people, and you'll actually be able to look at its behavior. Like how is it reloading? What is it doing? And maybe in the end, they'll start doing some things that are a little strange, like maybe it's hopping around more or doing some bizarre behavior, but it's in a 3D environment going around just cleaning house when it finds people. And that will, and hopefully people will realize that the gap between that and a Boston Dynamics plus 10 years from now is getting smaller. And that's the conversation we want people to be having on, well, what do we think, and do we want this to happen? The last point I want to shoot in there is playing autonomous on the Xbox is exciting, and that there's a lot of fun. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm dismissing this, because this will be a highlight for me. Kind of wrapping this up. It'll be a very fun project, and we're getting a lot of attention for it. The thing I'm really excited about is not one AI playing one Xbox. It's one AI playing 5 Xboxes in the same game where they're on the same team. And what that is showing off is a Hivemind. And the thing that you were kind of hitting on before, multitasking, humans can't understand Hiveminds. They're very confusing. They kind of overwhelm us. If I wanted to show you a Hivemind, let's say I had 5 TVs, so I've got 5 TVs, and I've got 5 Xbox controllers. You walk into a room and there's this alien monster that has 10 eyes and 10 arms with 5 controllers. But it has 1 brain, and it's playing. And your attempt to understand why it's playing so well or what it's doing, it surpasses our ability to appreciate it. But hopefully if you imagine that monster, you realize, oh, this is something new. And it it has a much better understanding of game state than any single engine or agent.
Wow.
And that's where we're going in the future. So for full autonomous war, like if you really, if we had a World War III where you have Manhattan-style spending, you're going to have Hivemind versus Hivemind on drones versus droids in the wild. And that's just kind of the natural evolution of militarized AI, is you want to share state.
That's amazing. So you've already played God kind of with GANs, because
we're making progress, and it's so much fun working on this project, because the thing that is there is a very, very heavy high performance compute demand. Because you would think playing the Xbox, no big deal. You just plug it up and start playing. But the high performance compute demand is insane just to pull it off. We have the hardware to do it, but more importantly, the software has to be really smart. So one of the things I was testing yesterday is I have a model running for muzzle flash that's getting an insane accuracy score, like AUC of 0.9999999. Like it's unbelievably good, and it's running on full 1080p, and it's running at 30 frames per second, and it's running on one CPU thread. And when you throw those stats out there, most people in AI, they would shake their head and say, well, that's not possible. You can't do a 1080p model on one CPU thread at 30 frames per second. That doesn't make any sense. And that's the type of stuff that I have a lot of fun with as we find those nuggets. And that kind of goes back to the original discussion. You have to have passion projects, and with passion projects, you can find some very innovative things that just kind of spill out. You didn't intend to find them, you weren't looking for them, but the necessity produced them. And so an alternative universe. So right now, we're building this startup, but if I was an alternative universe and I was a free agent, I would love a reality where I could walk into a VC group and say, hey, I need to raise $5 million. We're not going to generate any revenue. We're just going to play games on the Xbox. I'm going to hire a team of 10, and we're going to be head down. We won't make any revenue. I promise that we'll be in national marketing, if not international marketing, once every 6 months. Like we'll make a splash, and in the next 2 years we'll be bought. And I don't have the reputation today to just like pull that off, but I would love in the future to have that type of swagger in the VC tech community, to really just have someone take a risk like that, because I'm convinced I would make a massive bet that is actually not, like, if you have 10 people in a room that are incredibly smart, that are super motivated, and they just can't believe the tech that they're finding and inventing, and you've got a way to carry the mic on that, you will have so much residual tech that you've invented in 16, like by the time 2 years comes around, you will have a very compelling offer to sell that company for north of 30 million. Like I don't feel like it's really an argument. The question is, can you execute? Can you hire the right team? Can you make the right progress? And will the AI appetite on M&A go away? Anyway.
Well, doesn't sound like it.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it, but who knows? Maybe 5 years from now, kind of the next rodeo thing, maybe that'll be an opportunity where I find someone with deep enough pockets where they can write single checks, and I essentially set that up. Say, look, we are a deep research company. There's no revenue that will ever be attached to us, but we will be acquired, and that's kind of a guarantee. And we'll be 2 years from now.
So you've figured out how to play God with models. I mean, like making models with GANs, getting them to mate. You could probably even extend that into some kind of Hivemind where it's like an AI that runs its own miniature world, like and has TV shows or something, automatically generated TV shows. You've discussed creating a model for Halo AI that could lead to some kind of Hivemind warfare. I mean, these are really exciting things. What other applications of AI do you see right now that are really exciting to you that could improve the world?
Yeah. So I'm a big healthcare advocate. I'm actually a little discouraged on the healthcare situation in the U.S. I've made several comments about how HIPAA kills more people than it saves, and people jump in right away and say HIPAA doesn't kill people. But the point I'm trying to make is we have people that die all the time here in the U.S. where we have the data and we have the AI resources to have prevented that. But because of data privacy, data access, HIPAA, you just don't have as many people looking at these problems. And I don't expect the big wins to come from academics. So like, Berkeley or these different groups doing cancer research, I feel like they're just way behind on where some of the other people are that have just been solving more problems in industry. And in a very personal example of this, and I don't mean to bring this up because I don't want to make everything personal, but my wife has chronic kidney disease, and her kidneys for the last 10 to 15 years have been reducing in their efficiency. So our kidneys are 100%. We can go eat a really crappy meal and we're fine. Her kidneys operate at 40%. And the interesting thing is the nephrologists, who are the doctors that are responsible for kidneys, they don't know what's wrong. So they've done a kidney biopsy, they've looked at all these blood reports, they have no idea what's wrong. Thankfully, it's not getting worse, so we actually don't really care. As long as it stays above 15%, we don't care. She's fine. Once you get below 15%, then you have to go on dialysis and you need a kidney transplant. And most likely it's some type of autoimmune or something, but they just don't know. And when you go to the nephrologist, this respected physician comes out with white hair. He looks at a piece of paper, which is her urinalysis or her blood work, and he looks at two numbers and he has an opinion. And that thing I described to you makes me so angry. I'm so angry about it. And the reason I'm so angry about it is if I could take all of the blood work, like all of the labs, like give me all of the data. If I could take all the data from all the clinics for the West Coast of the US, like let's talk millions of patients, and if I knew their 5 to 10 year outcomes, if I had all that data, I don't have to build that model. I can take that to a junior data scientist. I can take that to new grads coming out of college. I can say, please build me a Bayesian model using all the structured data, maybe some text, and stack rank based on this stack rank, the root cause. And I'm convinced that my wife's disorder would be top 5. Like, it's not rocket science, but it feels like rocket science if you have a human doing things that they did decades old. And yeah, so there's a huge benefit there. I didn't mean to talk about healthcare that long. I think healthcare is game changing because the discovery will actually go away from the physician to our homes. So you will have a smart mirror or a smart shower or a smart toilet in the next 10 years or 20 years. It will know more about your health than your physicians do today. So, your risk of kidney failure, lung, like cancer, skin cancer, it'll constantly be looking at you full spectrum. So not just visual spectrum, we'll constantly be looking at you full spectrum. And it'll have really accurate models to say, don't eat Big Macs so much, or, whatever. like probably the intuitive feedback will be stuff we've already known for forever. But we've joked about having an AI attached to your head that everything you eat, it predicts your death day. If I'm looking at a Big Mac and I take a bite, I see my death date move up a couple weeks. But if I eat the kale, it'll move back a couple weeks. And so in the future, we are all going to eat kale. And that's it. The AI told us to do it, and we'll live for 150 years, and we'll just hate what we eat. But, that's the power of AI.
I mean, that's extremely exciting. That has a direct positive impact on everyone's life. Well, most of it's exciting.
Yeah.
Living for 150 years, I think, is exciting to many people, but eating kale, not so exciting. But if you have something or somebody, something that's like a person constantly reminding you to do it, that's extremely helpful. I mean, it will take less motivation. It'll give you motivation.
Yeah, like, how motivated would you be if your death date's changing?
Pretty motivated.
Yeah.
Yeah, because normally you can just ignore it, but I mean, even with other things like just Google Maps, watching your speed, I mean, that, and so many other applications, the having the technology integrated with our lives does kind of make
Yeah.
it twice. It doesn't let us, it lets us, it forces us not to ignore things.
Yeah, like self-driving cars will be really big. The other one I forgot to throw in there, I am very excited about the smart home. So a few things that are going to happen. So one of the stories I bring up is we had a tragedy that happened in our community where a 3-year-old girl was strangled by a blind cord and died. And this is not, I guess this happens. Like if you do research, you'll see, oh yeah, so many kids die every year in the US from blind cord strangulation at kind of in this age range. And in the future with AI, so the promise of AI, and we're definitely seeing daylight on this, and this will happen. The promise of AI is it allows you to treat AI as a router of actionable information. And so in my home, in my personal home, I have 5 security cameras in the home, and that number will grow. So in the future, I might have 50 or even 100 cameras where everything in my home is constantly monitored. It can't give that to me because I'd be overwhelmed. But with AI, it constantly monitors the perfect state of my home. And so if I have a toddler that walks into the kitchen and pulls out a kitchen knife and takes it into another room, my home will know. And based on the rules of the home and kind of my expectations, my home can escalate. And so now imagine a scenario, a kid is playing, this same 3-year-old in the future, they start getting strangled by the blind cord. Not only does the home know that this is happening, the home, maybe something that people haven't seen, but we've got some friends in LA, they're doing some really interesting stuff with localized radar. They have technology today where I can measure your child's heart rate through a wall. I don't even have to see them. I can measure their heart rate through a wall with localized radar, and I can even count people through a wall with localized radar. So there's a scenario in the future where, sure, you have cameras everywhere, but even if you can't see the person, you can monitor their heart rate and their vitals. And now imagine a scenario where your home determines that the 3-year-old is being strangled by the blind cord and their vitals are dropping. And, I just think that's amazing.
Yeah. And it will alert you, or even maybe call the...
Like, it'll alert you, and it could even escalate. It could escalate to, your neighbors, even the first responders. This is funny. You're the first person ever to get me emotional talking about AI. That's how much I love AI. I just get emotional. Like, AI is so badass, needs to save the world, and here's a real example where it can make a difference. And there's a key ethics thing here. People freak out talking about what I just talked about, where they think that data is going to the cloud because they're worried about privacy. Like if I know what your heart rate is and I'm an insurance company and you're walking around the house and I know you ate a Big Mac, like that's pretty messed up. But people feel very comfortable with this if the data doesn't leave the home. So what you're going to have is every single home is going to have an AI hub. They're going to have some type of GPU or special neural system that just comprehends everything, and we love it. As parents, as homeowners, we love it. Like security, someone breaks in your home, immediately, everything. You could even have like an auto lock in all your rooms. So if someone happened to break into your home at night, all of the doors auto lock, and you've got heads up, and I would imagine an intruder would want to run away. If the home really knows, like imagine if the home really knows that there's an intruder in there, almost like it's an entity or it's alive. Do you want to be in there? Like, I don't want to be in there.
Yeah.
What is the home going to do? Turn on the maze system, or, turn on all the lights, or, you can fingerprint someone from a heart rate. So even if you're a bad guy and you've got a mask on your face, the home will collect a heart rate signature and send that to a police. And then if you walk into a Starbucks and you have the same heart rate signature, you can be arrested. So there's all this stuff on accountability, where it will be so hard for you to, 10 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, you walking down the street and breaking a window and getting away with it will be impossible. Today, sure, like you can get away with it, whatever. But in the future, that would be impossible.
Wow. It's the possibilities. You really are opening up my mind to the possibilities, just how limitless they are with AI and all this new sensor technology. It's really incredible. Thanks for sharing, Ben.
Yeah, there's definitely a good and a bad. Like you probably see both futures. There's a very exciting part of it, and there's a very scary part of it.
Yes, yes. I mean, hopefully we'll all just be so perfect. I mean, and advance at a faster and faster rate. I think that's the most exciting. It's a little scary to have to be so perfect, to be forced to be so responsible in a sense, but it's much better than the alternative of just super Terminator hive mind robots killing everyone. So,
Yeah.
so that's what we have to work to get. We all have to aspire to, is the former scenario where we're all perfect.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting. I have more of a pessimistic long-term outcome, just because, the way countries operate, and their appetite for a militarized presence is always concerning. But the other thing that will happen too is, think about all the things you do or commit to on a weekly basis that you don't want to do. Mow your lawn, pick up your socks, weed your garden, cook a meal, do the dishes. There's a future that will definitely come in our life where you don't do any of those things. And it's not because you have a nanny or a handyman. It's because you've got an AI that'll do it for you. And they already have autonomous mowers that will mow your lawn without you. I'm going to be a lot more excited when those autonomous mowers have lasers that are looking for weeds, and they kill them with visual AI, where it's literally just looking at your lawn and saying, I don't like this blade of grass, I'm going to kill it. Or I don't like this bug, I'm going to kill it. That gets a lot more exciting. But so one of the things people talk about is you have all these AI components. You've got a Roomba, which is quite dumb today, but you've got, these things will get smarter. So you're going to have an AI system that will do this, do that, do this, do that. You have all these systems. They get expensive and they add up. Someday in the future, you're going to have someone crazy like Steve Jobs, and people talk about this, the world's first trillionaire. Someday in the future, you're going to have the world's first trillionaire, and they're probably alive today. You don't know they're going to be the world's first trillionaire. And they are going to be so crazy and so ambitious that they're going to decide that all of these things, like the 5 to 10 AI things that people are paying $100 or $1,000 for here and there, should be in a humanoid droid, and it will be a $100,000 humanoid droid, and people will pay for it on the lease. Or maybe it'll be a $300,000 droid, and the wealthy will pay for it on the lease. And it will do all those things almost. And so there could be a market. It's too early today from the technology side, but there could be a market in the future where the wealthy and the middle class have droids that will do everything. Everything you want them to do. Pick up socks, no worries. Pick weeds, no worries. They're just a droid in your home, and that becomes a very strange reality. Like there's actually a lot of ethical discussions that come up that are pretty upsetting with you having a droid in your home for different reasons, because it's a fun topic.
Awesome. Thanks again, Ben. Thank you for coming on to the podcast. We're starting to run out of time, so I just wanted to ask you one last question. Do you have any causes or resources that you care to share with the audience?
For causes, I think this isn't really AI related, but I'll just throw it out there. People don't realize how real adverse impact is today, like just out in the wild. So if you're a black female or if you're a minority, you have a huge uphill battle in the U.S., even with laws and regulations. So I think for people out there, anyone that would be considering hiring on the hiring side, definitely go out of your way to source any available minority candidates for some of these tech positions that you have, to do your part to at least give them the opportunity to see if they're qualified. Sometimes it's easy to just source a bunch of white guys from LinkedIn, but I think it's good for people to think of that. Then one of the things I tell to people that are beginning in data science, try to contribute back to an open source project. Try to commit your code back into sklearn, NumPy, SciPy, Keras, whatever it is. Give it back to the community. That helps the community, but it also really helps you. Like that would definitely stand out in a job interview if you were able to say that your commits had been accepted into MXNet. If you want to go get a job at Amazon or PyTorch, you want to go get a job at Facebook, that would carry a lot of weight.
That's a great idea. That's thank you, Ben. Yeah, thank you so much. Your insights are really admirable and inspiring. And I mean, especially the part about hiring minorities. You know, you've quantified it probably better than anyone else in the world.
Yeah, and I think that's what we've seen just analyzing the data and looking at stuff, that it's 2019, and unfortunately, it is way harder for you to get a job if you are an underrepresented minority compared to what people are going after. And it's really too bad, but I don't feel like people are evil. Like, people aren't trying to be evil or malicious in the interview process. They just don't realize they're doing it.
They want familiarity.
Yeah, you hire based on familiarity, likability, but there's also this unconscious bias. So they don't realize that they're less likely to hire someone who, is a different race or age combination or whatever. So it's good for people to be aware of it. How many black females have you sourced? Can you even find some for the role you're looking for? Or could you call yourself out for an age bias during an interview process when you're looking at a candidate? And you just have to be kind of hyper aware. And it's a problem that we all have, but it's good to talk about. And it's good to admit that it probably is a problem, and it's a problem for you and me and everyone in the recruiting space.
Wow. Okay. All right. Thanks for coming on, Ben. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Tyler. Bye-bye.
Bye.